Thank you. So this is interesting. Everybody understand my New York accent? Fantastic. So interestingly enough, 20 years ago I was working in artificial intelligence and virtual reality. Now I pull up weeds. So what I'm doing for a living is I'm actually a professional forager. So it's a tough job. Every morning I wake up and I go in the forest and I get to pick up plants. And I work with celebrity chefs during the week. I pick up one restaurant every year and I introduce them to the flavor of California. I've been doing that for 16 years now, and it's really a research on the actual flavor of what I call the terroir. And we're going to talk a little bit about this. I hope I can pronounce that word, paradigm shift. That's what I say. Shift. And the F. So my paradigm shift really occur with something simple. Seeds. Oh no, I went too fast. And I go back there. And I actually pick up some on the way here. I was passing by and I just went. This is actually called wild spinach, which is a wild quinoa. Nobody knows about it. It's a little weed. And, you know, it's kind of one of the forgotten food, really. And if you take a look at those guys, this is all native seeds. So you can actually go into the wilderness, and I discovered that native people used to collect over 100 different seeds for food. Guess how many are available at the store if you want to buy it? Not one. You can say, well, what about chia? Well, the chia that you buy at the store is actually not the real chia. If you want the real chia, you have to go into the Mojave Desert, and you have to pick it up. It's a, you know, a little thing. It's a lot of work. It's usually like 30 miles an hour wind. It's hot. And trying to collect your seed in the same time in the wind. It doesn't make it very easy. So at the end of the day or at the end of the morning, you're very happy when you collected half a cup of seeds. You know, but they're very valuable. This is the actual flavor. And so those are some of the seeds that you collect, and some of them are just very obscure. You know, for example, on the left side, this is black sage seeds. In the middle one is something called curly dock seeds. And the last one, beautiful, is called Clarkia seeds. Anybody bought some Clarkia seeds at the supermarket? So you can do all kinds of different stuff with it. You can do bread, you can make porridge, you can do all kinds of interesting things. Some of those seeds actually are very fabulous when you actually taste them. Some of them taste like peanut butter, for example. If you roast them, some of them will taste like chicory. So you basically have 100 seeds or 100 flavors that are not available anymore to you. So if you go to the supermarket, the section for seeds are probably, I think, like 6 or 7 of them. Ideal is probably 120 of them, 120 different flavors if I add the non-native one like mustard, for example. So my shift occurred when I was thinking, I'm saying, oh my God, you know, we have all these incredible little seeds that are not even available to people. What do we get at the market? And if you think about it, you know, you go to the market and what are those potatoes? I love potatoes. I'm from Belgium. We make French fries. You know, but if you think about it, you know, you go to the supermarket, you can only buy like what, 4 or 5? Do you know how many potatoes are available in the world? Over 4,000. 4,000. You've been offered 4 or 5 of them. You know, if you go to South America, you know, you get all kinds of different weird potatoes like that. All kinds of different flavor, all kinds of different textures. Very interesting stuff. And if you go into the market, you know, this is a market in South America, you have a market about potatoes, for example. So, as a Belgian guy, this is paradise. How many kind of French fries can you make with this stuff? French fries are really not from France, they're from Belgium. Same thing with lettuce. You go to the store and you go like, okay, I want to make a salad, and you basically being offered a choice of probably, what, 5 or 6. And if I go in the wilderness, interestingly enough, I can probably, at the right time, which was 2 months ago, I can probably feed 20 people in 5 minutes. And I have a choice probably of 30 or 40 different greens that I can use as lettuce. So we're talking a little bit about power of choice. People think, they go to the store and go like, oh my God, I have all this food available. But the reality is you really have a very limited choice on the kind of food that you actually can eat. You actually don't have any freedom. If you go to the store, you basically offer some specific things, and that's it. So that was kind of like my little shift to realize that, a lot of the people who come to my class because they want to have a little bit more freedom of food, the freedom to actually get new flavors, which you cannot get anymore. I don't even know why it's there. But, speaking of the terroir, this is, if you do some research, this is actually what people think of a terroir. It's basically farmland. And if you go back, this is what you think of a market. And if you go to the California market, like Santa Monica market, I would say that 80% of what you buy is actually non-native. This is all imported stuff. How can you get the flavor of California when you actually, all the markets is really offering, just things that came from different countries. So this is my market. I love my market. Every morning I go to my market, a little bird chirping, everything is beautiful. But this is the kind of produce I can gather in one day, in one morning. In one morning on the left side, I have my something called lamb's quarter, which is my little seed right there. I have some wild beans, I have all kind of different wild berries. On the right side, I have, what do I have? Plantain. I probably can collect like 20 to 30 different plants every morning. Out of the blue, just going to the forest. It's like a supermarket for me at this point. So which make me think at one point, I'm going like, this is interesting, speaking of California cuisine. When you think of California cuisine, what is it? I ask people, I go like, what do you think of California cuisine? You get all kinds of different stuff. You get tacos, sushi, And I like to use Google, because Google for me is like, speaking of technology, it's a huge mind. And I go to Google Images, and this is where millions and billions of people are tuning in and, basically deciding what a keyword is. So if I put Southern California cuisine on Google Images, for example, this is what you get. Burgers, pizzas, interesting. A little bit of fish. And it really goes all over the place. There is really no California cuisine, and that was suddenly my big shift. I'm going like, oh my God, there is no such a thing as a California cuisine. None of it is native. It's all based pretty much on food that's imported. But if you do some research on different regions, for example, Mexico, you look at Mexico, and here you have a Mexican cuisine. So it's interesting, we actually don't have really a Southern California cuisine based on the actual terroir, which will be the wilderness and the native plants that are existing there. There is one country that did great, if you think Denmark. There's a whole movement called the Nordic cuisine, which started, I think, in 2003, if I recall, by René Redzepi with the restaurant Noma, and everybody got onto it. And they actually created a whole identity for themselves by using their own ingredients, the native ingredients, and created what we call the native or the Nordic cuisine. And if you do a search on Nordic cuisine, take a look, and it's super integrated. This is all ingredients that come from their own location and land. California, we don't have that, interestingly enough. So I decided, I said, well, if nobody does it, maybe I should start doing it. Not in a bad way. I'm actually not a chef or not a cook. I'm just a forager. I deal with plants. My wife is a chef, so we started to kind of think about it and do some experiment. But for example, acorn. Acorn was the main staple of native people. Where do you get acorn in Southern California cuisine? You know, in Korea they still eat it. The only place where you can get it is actually in a Korean store. But try to go to Santa Monica farmer's market and say, can I have acorn, please? They just don't exist. Nobody's using them. It's super tasty. Once you know to prepare them, it's super nutty, so it's a fantastic flavor, loaded with protein, loaded with fat. It doesn't exist anymore. So I started to experiment, and over 16 years, I basically just started cooking using wild plants. And as of last week, I counted how many plants and ingredients I can actually cook with, and I actually can forage over 450 different ingredients. So by myself, I can probably forage as much or even more than the Santa Monica market, which is supposed to be the biggest one in the world. And you find those in the wild, in nature. So this is a good example, you know, of using nature. It's basically a bunch of very aromatic herbs. And I actually cook pears in it, because pears are sugary and a lot of those aromatic herbs are actually bitter. And basically I just steam them into a pot, and you end up with something that looks like this. It's basically all the flavors are going to the pear, and actually sprinkle a bit of insect sugar, we're going to talk about that one soon, in it. And the insect sugar actually melts, goes at the bottom of the pot, and creates a syrup. And then you just serve your pears with a syrup on it. I'm going to make you hungry. Here's another example. You know, you can go fishing, pick up a trout, and you can go Neanderthal on it. You can basically just go along the bank and collect all the plants that you need, such as on this one, white sage, black sage, California sagebrush, a little bit of California bay, some grass, and you actually can cook that fish right there into barks, for example. So you can make a whole cuisine completely just out of nothing. Flavor, I wish I could cook it today, but the flavor are absolutely phenomenal. Here's a good example, you know, getting inspired by the forest fire that we have in Los Angeles. You know, this is a dish where I actually went to the forest and picked up some of the manzanita branch that were burned, and I basically make a wild currant brandy. Not that I do moonshine, it's illegal, so I will never do it. But, you know, and it's basically a bird that you find in the wild, which is a quail. So there's a little quail art, cook in brandy, and on top of it you actually have pickled wild seeds, which approximately have something like 25 different wild seeds. Rabbit cook in forest floor, different leaves, different aromatic. So there's a tremendous amount of creation that you could actually do. This is my, instead of doing coq au vin, I actually do quail au vin, but I do my own wine using elderberries and different mushrooms I picked up on the forest. So the flavor is just, it's basically a coq au vin with the flavor of California. This is some of the infusion I used to do for restaurants. I was working with Ludo Lefebvre at the time, and this is just wild plant that I actually infused in cold water. And I probably used something like 30 different wild plants to infuse flavor. Some of the flavor actually you don't even have to boil them, because very often you don't figure out that the sap, some plants are like very sticky, and the flavor actually in the stickiness. So if you boil them, they're super bitter, but if you infuse them in cold water, oh my God, the flavor is just like absolutely unbelievable. Speaking of, you know, I'm from Belgium, I'm actually a fake French. So one of the things I love to do is beer. And it's amazing, I did a lot of research on primitive beer. And at this point, I basically can go into a forest, and pretty much I don't need anything to actually make a primitive beer, pretty much the way it was done like 2,000 years ago. One of the plants that was used as hops can be found anywhere in California. Actually, if you reach in your pocket, you probably can find some. Proof in point, let me see. There you go. See? So this is a plant called mugwort, which was used by the Viking and the Celt to actually, instead of hops. Very super, isn't it aromatic? It is super aromatic. But if you want to make beer, the only thing you need really is something like sugar, plant, a little bit of water, and what else? Sugar, plant, and yeast. And for example, yeast can be found in, this is yeast from pine bark. So I can go to the forest, put some pine bark into a sugar water, and then you open it and it goes if it doesn't go in my face. And there you go. So you can create your own yeast, you can create your own plant, and then you can put it together and create the most incredible drink. This is not a beer that was done with the mountains. How many minutes do I have left? 3 minutes. Fantastic. So this is an example. This is actually infused salt with wild plants. You can create probably, I say for 450 plants, the amount of condiment that you can make is just incredible. It's, I would say maybe 3,000 or 4,000, different ingredients by mixing things. If you can make beer or wine from wild plants, you can also make your own vinegar, for example. If you make your own vinegar, you can make your own pickle. And if you have 400 different plants to play with, and by mixing them, it's just unbelievable. Cheese. I can go into the wilderness. If I find a goat, I can milk it. But, but for example, that cheese was actually made with sap. So I actually went and found some fig trees, which grows everywhere into the forest. You can collect 5 drops of sap. It's actually a lot of fun. You walk around with your little jar of milk on ice in the forest. It makes for a great explanation when somebody says, oh, what the hell are you doing? I'm just walking my milk. But you basically just put 5 drops, of the sap. You go back home, you take a quart of goat cheese, put those 5 drops of milk, and suddenly it will, 5 drops of sap, and suddenly it will curdle, and you can make cheese out of it. So, the amount of creation is just pretty much infinite. This is dark prosciutto, aged with black sage and probably 10 other different wild plants. Canning, this is wild currant and wild fennel, so you can start doing your own canning just using 100% wild flavor. This is my laboratory. So I basically have 5 different shelves that are loaded with all kinds of different, preserve and beer and wine and vinegars, going on, including bark, seeds, insects, pretty much anything that's edible. If it moves, and it's edible, I will forage it. Speaking of that one, that was an interesting one. This was something I've been looking for 5 years, and this was a major source of food for native people, caterpillar. And this was probably one of the biggest surprises. You go like, oh my God, this is like, ugh. But I was totally surprised. What native used to do is to actually collect those, and they exist by the millions. Nobody's touching them anymore. You go to Death Valley, you can find millions of them, and their technique was just cut the head off, empty them, and you go like, well, there's not going to be anything left if you empty them. But no, then you realize that those big caterpillars are actually pure muscle. So you actually end up with a lot. And when you study it, you suddenly realize that it has more, if you take by weight a hamburger and those caterpillars, it's actually more fat than a regular hamburger and better fat, and actually more protein than a hamburger. And at the same time, I would say that in one morning, I will collect the equivalent of 5 hamburgers in maybe 15 minutes. So there is all kind of different food. I would say again, in terms of California cuisine, we probably have 450, and probably in the next year we'll tell you 500 ingredients that have been completely forgotten and never used, which could create an interesting California cuisine. And this was my crunchy, nice little caterpillar. And anyway, I just wanted to bring you the awareness on what's available to us, and that was my little shift. There you go. Thank you.